are going live. Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Gillis. I am a wild woman and part of the Wild Women's Adventure Club, which was started by Harmony Ekstead and lots of amazing women. And we are here tonight to talk to four powerful women who want to share their thoughts and experiences on polyamory, open relationships, monogamousness, relationship anarchy, and more. I'm here from Austin, Texas. Have been in open relationships myself and think they're fantastic, if not complicated. I produced a show called Bedpost Confessions, which is a storytelling show devoted to talking about sex and gender, relationships, and humanizing sexuality so that we can all just be happier, more sexy people. So I'd love to turn this over to my wonderful team here, and they're going to introduce each other and tell you a little bit about themselves. And then I'll prompt them with some cool questions that this audience out here has sent to us. Take it away. Harmony.
Oh, me. What? Hey, everyone. Look, I'm a panelist. How fun is that? Julie, thank you so much for moderating this panel. I asked Julie to moderate for a couple reasons. One, because it's fun to get to do this part too, and also because, as you can tell, it's really dark where I am. I'm in a valley in rural Galicia on the western coast of Spain, so the internet's kind of janky. So if I cut in and out, apologies. I try to be with you all. I am lucky enough to get to introduce Dirty Lola, and you know you're cool when you have an adjective as part of your name. So Lola and I actually got to meet for the first time in New York, which was really, really lovely. We had this spontaneous jam session on non-monogamy with Erica, and so I got to verify for you all that she is in fact as wonderful as her bio, which leads you to believe. She's a naughty storyteller, sex encourager, sex toy peddler, and the creator and host of the live sex Q&A and podcast Sex at a Go-Go, which is amazing. She has been doing all kinds of sexy things for the last 6 years, on stage and off the stage, and she's taken Sex at a Go-Go across the country to LA, New Jersey, Albuquerque, and has presented at Catalyst Con East and West, New York and LA, and during Sex Week at Baruch College. Is that how you say that?
Baruch, yeah.
Baruch. Sweet.
Baruch.
And others. And when she's not doing all of that stuff, you can find her behind the counter at Shag Brooklyn, where she runs a workshop program. And if you're lucky enough to be her Facebook friend, you get to see pictures of what she looks like when she goes to play parties, which is very exciting as well.
You can see that on my Twitter, too.
Yeah!
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lola, for being part of this.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. Am I next? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So I get to introduce Harmony. I'm reading because I'm not braining well because I just got back from Chicago from said play party and other things. Harmony Ekstead is the author of How to Get a Wild Woman, the founder of the Wild Women's Adventure Club, and the panelist curator for Wild Women Wednesdays. She normally serves as moderator for these panels, but based on extremely persistent badgering by some of you, she's stepping into the role of panelist this month. And we're super lucky about that. She's a former high-end dating coach. I like the sound of that, specializing in working with people with significant barriers to dating, including people with cancer, adult virgins, single parents, and people dating non-monogamously. She has been in a relationship anarchist, yes, for 7 years and draws heavily on the philosophy of relationship anarchy and non-monogamy in the work she does to build communities generally, and the Wild Women's Adventure Club in particular. Yay, Harmony! Who's next?
All right, let's have Erica go next.
Well, I was introducing you, Julie. And
you were, but then there's now Rebecca too. So
I failed to read. It's my fault. I'll go.
You can go. Oh. We were gonna round robin everybody.
Okay. I thought I was introducing Julie, so that's all I'm prepared to do. But Julie did it.
And I'll introduce Rebecca then. You introduce me, and I'll introduce Rebecca.
Okay.
Do it that way.
You can do
all right,
go,
Erica.
Real, non-monogamous kind of way, right? You
can
have
yeah.
A little.
Oh.
Hey, what's up?
Cool. Okay, so who's introducing? Okay, someone's introducing me, right? And that.
Yes, everyone is going to be introduced by the time this is over.
Okay. All right. No, but I'm sorry. Who am I introducing?
Why don't you introduce me, and then I'll introduce you.
I think I lost sound, y'all.
We can hear you.
At least I can't hear you.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Hello.
It is.
Hi.
Is that better? Oh, she left.
Oh, all right. Well, we're going to get her back.
Yeah.
Erica, you want to introduce me, and I'll introduce you?
Sure. So Julie is your host for this evening. Julie Gillis is how you pronounce your last name, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, awesome. And from her bio, what I see is she's basically the sex ed guru, is what I'm calling her, of Texas.
Whoa.
Yes, that's right. All of it. All of the whole school. She's an artist and activist focused on social justice and community. She produces events that merge artistic expression and cultural change. She currently is an impact producer and campaign specialist at Production for Use in Austin, Texas. Julie is also a producer of transformational events and is the co-founder of Bedpost Confessions, Texas' singular storytelling event on sexuality, unspoken, a space for emotional justice. Julie has helped produce 1448 Austin, the world's quickest theater festival, and was the producer of Ladies Are Funny Festival for 6 years. Julie has, it's really awesome.
I know.
I sound
You've
so
done
good. A lot. There's more though.
I should retire.
There's more. Julie has presented at South by Southwest Interactive TEDx, Great Hills Momentum Con, Hatch, the Woodhull Sexual Freedom Alliance, Bedpost Confessions, Unspoken, and Testify, as well as hosting numerous events in Texas and beyond. That's Julie. Awesome.
That's
killing the game.
I'm killing it, crushing it. All right, and back at you, Erica. Let me read your bio. It's pretty cool. Black, queer, Sagittarius, Cancer warrior, activist, sex educator, and performer. Erica's taught sex education to elementary age youth. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. Across New York City for the past 7 years. The catalyst of her work in sex education was her service as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ethiopia, which looks like that was in 08 to 10. So
2008.
Years ago.
Yeah, 2010. Mm-hmm.
She's been featured in Cosmopolitan, Huffington Post, and she loves singing every Whitney Houston song, dancing, and hanging out with her dog. And I would love to sing Whitney Houston with you or backup.
Yes!
I'll do some backup when we're at Woodhull together.
Yes, can't wait.
It'll be super fun.
I'll add it to my bedpost confession.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's see, do we have Rebecca back?
I should be back.
There she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go.
So who hasn't been introduced? Is that Rebecca?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I will go ahead and introduce Rebecca. Rebecca Hiles is a dating, relationship, and sexual wellness coach called the Frisky Fairy. She's a writer who addresses issues of polyamory, cancer, sex education, and sex toys. She has contributed to Sexpert.com, Exojane.com, and has had her writing featured on Everyday Feminism, discussing her life as a polyamorous cancer patient, among other things. She's spoken at Catalyst Con West, the Mandate Conference, Catalyst Con East, Spring Poly Fever, Awesome Con, Rocky Mountain Poly Living, Atlanta Poly Weekend, and Woodhull Sexual Freedom Summit. She's a member of the Poly Leadership Network, certified as a sex educator through Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts, yes, and voted one of the top 100 sex blogging superheroes of 2014 and 15. Right now, she is a student of Dr. Ava Kiddell's Loveology University, and she is writing a book on coming out as poly. Thank you all for being here. So, polyamory, non-monogamy, relationship anarchy. We're all in this to some extent, and we ask our audience members on the Facebook event what were their biggest questions. Not surprisingly, one of the biggest questions that came up was about jealousy feelings, exploring but not losing their proverbial grip on their emotions. So I'd like to pose that kind of compilation of questions and topics on jealousy and what that means in poly and non-monogamous and open relationships to you to take on. Anybody would like to jump in on that first? Everybody's like, no one has any jealousy at all. Everybody's fine. What are you talking about?
I think we talked about this in the when we were in the coffee shop, Erica and Harmony, that it kind of annoys me when people go, "What about the jealousy?" It's like, well, what about it? Because it's I remember when I was monogamous being jealous. It's not like jealousy is something that only happens to people practicing open relationships of some type.
Right.
And the thing is you figure out how to work through it. It's not this impenetrable wall or an insurmountable obstacle. You figure it out and you work around it just like you would in anything else. It's like I'm jealous of people's outfits all the time. It doesn't stop me from like going outside and looking at other people. I still go about my day-to-day life. So it exists. I think people also think, oh, well, you're doing this, so you must never be jealous. And it's like, to the contrary. I mean, I think that was my whole first year of polyamory, was a constant sense of jealousy that I had to keep figuring out, like, why was I feeling that way and how to get over that particular moment of jealousy. And it wasn't until I was at Geeky Kink, and I was at a class about polyamory, sitting with all of my partners, and the person leading the class basically said, like, jealousy is your shit. But usually when you are feeling jealous is because a need isn't being met. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Because then I started feeling less guilty about being jealous. Because, jealousy is always seen as like this emotion you're not supposed to be feeling, or you're wrong for feeling. And you're never wrong. Usually it's a flag. It means you need to investigate further. And that was the best thing I could have ever learned about it, because now when it comes up I sit down and I'm like, well, why am I feeling this way? And sometimes I'm just plain old jealous and I need to get the fuck over it, and sometimes there's things that I need to actually work through by myself or with my partner, or first by myself and then with my partner or partners. Sometimes it's everybody. So
yeah, I think oh, go, Becca.
I mean, I've always been a particularly jealous person in general. Like, that's just kind of who I am and my MO. But it's a lot about like managing your shit and like owning your shit and recognizing that just because you're feeling jealous doesn't mean that anybody else has to do anything about it. And I think that was very much what Lila said, of like, when I realized that, jealousy is just sort of a red flag that something is going wrong, then I was like, oh, the skies have opened, I put glasses on for the first time, everything is clear now, because it is, and sometimes I've even found that being jealous of like a partner is not just a need that I'm not getting met, because I've been jealous of like a hobby or like a job, which is very strange, just of my partners, because I just feel like I'm not getting the same kind of attention or affection that hobby or job is. So a lot of just owning it and admitting to it, I think, is a big one too. Admit that you're jealous.
Hey, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a little hard time hearing you. Again, you probably just have to get a little closer up to the phone.
A little closer.
Yeah, there we go.
Better? Yeah.
You're saying some great stuff, and I don't want to miss it.
Now we get to see my face.
Well, your face
so
is
close.
beautiful.
But yeah, so it's just owning your shit and acknowledging that you're jealous. Like, that's the big one, is to make sure that you say, I am feeling jealous, and these are the reasons why. Not just, I'm having some feeling. Like, acknowledge that it exists, acknowledge that it's a feeling, and normalize it, because I think non-monogamy tends to put this like big thing, oh, I don't get jealous. Whatever.
I like what you're saying there. I had an epiphany about polyamory and non-monogamy after borrowing a vacuum cleaner. I wrote about this for Bedpost. Well, no, it's true. I was borrowing this vacuum cleaner. We have like one rug in the house, and so why buy a vacuum cleaner for one rug? But it was getting all janky, and so I was borrowing this vacuum cleaner, and I thought, well, this is great. I don't ever have to give it back. And then the minute I thought that I didn't have to give it back, I went, what if I need it? What if I need that vacuum cleaner today, and I can't have it? And then I realized that we're such a culture of like single serving size, like everybody having their own individual everything, that if I couldn't share a vacuum cleaner, it would be real hard to do non-monogamy effectively. Till I learned how to like, put things in their proper perspective.
That's so funny. I remember that story, Julie. It's awesome. The vacuum cleaner of non-monogamy. I would like plus one everything that's already been said, and what I'll add is that for me, I often think jealousy it is an umbrella term that encompasses a lot of other things. So sometimes we say I'm jealous, and that doesn't totally get down to what's going on. So I can be jealous because someone's like really pitting me against someone else that they're dating, and that's like a natural reaction to that. I could be jealous because I have some insecurities that it's my job to work through. I could be jealous because I'm not getting something I need and I haven't asked for it, or set good parameters around making sure that I'm taken care of. So or like maybe I just need to acknowledge it and get some reassurance from my partner or partners. So when I feel like twinges of things, and for me oftentimes the word jealous isn't what shows up, like I have some different feeling, like I have this sudden feeling that I should immediately leave the relationship and probably the country, like, and that's what shows up, is I'm like, oh, I feel claustrophobic, and then I'll be like, or maybe that's not what's going on. So the word jealous doesn't always come to mind instantly for me, but when I dig down and can acknowledge it, and figure out what's at the root of it, like, is it like you're pulling some bullshit and like we got to talk about this, or like I had an experience recently where I was just like not totally sure where I fit into a situation, like a complicated setup with some new partners who have other new partners, and I was sort of like, I'm not sure there's like room for me, and feeling sad and nervous about that. And the like really sweet thing that happens when you talk about this, and I think there's more freedom to do this in non-monogamy than monogamy, because you're not supposed to be jealous if you're monogamous. When you acknowledge it, the other person gets to be like, oh, no, let me show you how much room there is for you, and like give you this gift. If you're vulnerable, that doesn't get to happen if you don't start with like, okay, like I'm having these feelings that's super unpleasant to admit, and I like feel imperfect and like a jerk or vulnerable or whatever it is. It creates for me one of my most favorite memories recently is like in the wake of having acknowledged that. So like there's so much fear around the jealousy, but there's no consideration of what it can open up and make possible when we let ourselves like lean into this space and like the self-growth and the growth in our relationship. So that's, I think, what I would add to that.
Well, those are excellent points. Erica?
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking of what necessarily I could add to it, because I agree with what everybody was saying, and I think personally I was thinking I really get, for lack of better words, I get off on jealousy. Like I really love when I'm jealous. It feels good for me. It feels good for me to hear my partner tell me about somebody they're dating, and what they're getting. And I know that I feel jealous, but I don't resist it. And I feel like oftentimes we're taught to resist jealousy. We're taught to resist feelings of anger. We're taught to resist feelings of sadness. Everything is supposed to be happy and wonderful all the time, and that's just not real. And I think I've kind of like changed the context of jealousy in the sense of like, it's not a bad thing. Like, it's just something that's happening in my body. Like, I feel uncomfortable, and it's not necessarily bad that I feel uncomfortable, and I want my partner or partners to be getting what they need. So I'm just going to go into this jealousy and listen, like, oh, is she doing that for you? That's really fascinating that she does that. Yeah, I don't do that. Like, and sometimes I'm like, no, I don't do that, and I will never do that. Like, I'm never gonna, like, clean your shoes. I'm never gonna polish your shoes. So if she does that, that's fantastic. I'm not ever. So I think I just try to, like, I think the question of jealousy is also really interesting, because I think people have it like it's a bad thing, and like it doesn't come up in monogamous relationships. And I'm waiting for the Kinsey of relationships that talks about how relationships exist on a spectrum, and that in monogamy, people are looking at other people anyway. I mean, it happens, you know,
I feel
so
like
it's, yeah.
That scale should already exist somewhere, because
Right.
I talk about that all the time, that like relationships exist on a spectrum, very much like the Kinsey scale. It's not just black and white.
No, you're right. Oh, that's so awesome. We probably could spend the entire hour just talking about that particular nugget of stretching out, and really beautiful points about how monogamous individuals get jealous. People get jealous of other people's projects, perhaps. Like, one of the great things non-monogamy has done for me is when I think about how I manage time. And my husband and I have lots of projects, and we don't have other partners, but those projects are partners in some way. So to be able to think about the joy he gets from working on a film, right? So we all experience that back and forth of feelings, and I love being able to put a positive light on jealousy, Erica. That's really, really great. We have a couple of questions on health and safety, how people might deal with the potentials of STIs, safe sex, and a question about a poly couple that this person knows that had to deal with an unplanned pregnancy with no real roadmap to manage all of the health and ethics around it, pre-poly counseling, so to speak. What have you all experienced in terms of either physical safety or pregnancy prevention and / or counseling around those types of road less travel?
Oh, I have so many thoughts on STIs and polyamory.
All right.
So I have, on multiple occasions, either been exposed to or, on multiple occasions been exposed to STIs.
Closer to your face.
I have on multiple occasions been exposed to STIs. I hope everybody's like really excited about my eyebrow situation. But it's been pretty consistent. And actually, recently, I tested positive for herpes 2, and it was a low positive, so we were pretty sure it was a false positive, which it was. But for about 6 months there, 3 to 6 months, I was living as though I had herpes, because that's what my test said. My test read positive. It said it was positive, and I was still able to date people. I was still able to, have sex with people, and I had no real concern there. And it's, as long as you're doing the research and paying attention and knowing where your boundaries are and what scares you, identifying why something scares you, in terms of safety, and kind of making sure that you have all the information in place. Do you need to use gloves or dental dams or internal condoms? Like, know your options for safer sex materials, and make sure that you're talking to your doctors, to your partners. Like, you need to have these conversations. If you're playing around with non-monogamy, if you are non-monogamous, get in and get tested regularly, and ask them to test for everything they can think of, and tell your partners the results and ask them to do the same. Is that not just, this isn't just for non-monogamy, this normalizes testing on a regular basis for everyone, which should just be a part of wellness healthcare.
I think this question is, I echo what Rebecca says, and I also think this question is interesting. Dirty Lola and Harmony and myself were kind of talking about this when we met up at the cafe, of just like, I don't understand how this question is specific to polyamory or polyamorous people or non-monogamous relationship styles when people should just be getting tested, period. Even if you're married, people have affairs in marriages. So like everybody just get tested. Everybody.
It's almost like there's a little stigma attached to the question.
Yeah, for
right?
sure. Just
Right?
like, okay, you all are clearly like fooling around, which great, fantastic. Maybe that is the case, but maybe not. So you could be poly and still not be getting laid. So that's very real. So like, you know, but like I don't understand why it's specific to poly people. Like everybody get tested. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things we were talking about too is like statistically, most people who are monogamous aren't monogamous. They're not. So the thing that's nice about an open relationship is like you know that there's a possibility that you could be getting exposed to things, which means you can be smart about getting tested regularly, whereas monogamy can sometimes be a false sense of security. But I also think like it speaks to sort of this bigger cultural stigma attached to like there's certain kind of germs that are just like the cost of doing business for being a human that exists in the world, and then there's certain kind of germs that make you a bad human, right? So like I flew on like a ton of airplanes recently and like got a cold. Nobody is going to call me a whore because I got a cold. And like, how dare you? Well, like, this is what you get for exposing yourself to hundreds of people. You deserve it. Like, be glad it wasn't something more permanent.
Because I definitely have a cold from the play party I was at, and I'm pretty sure that everybody's going to call me a dirty, dirty whore because of it.
Yeah, but it'll be people you know, and it'll be because you like
That's
it.
true. That's true.
But, like,
excellent point, Harmony.
All of a sudden, if the germs are like passed in some sexual way, then it's really scary. So I think it's like understanding what are your the kinds of risks that you're exposed to with different kinds of behavior, and what's your risk tolerance. So there have been times in my life, Rebecca and Erica and I are all cancer survivors, and there's been times where my risk tolerance has been very low. Because I was in the middle of treatment, and that was like, I just cannot right now deal with having to treat anything else. Like, that's like my risk tolerance, right? And that was really appropriate for caring for my body, or if your immune system is compromised, right? That's like a great thing to know. But then there are times where I'm more healthy, and I might have a higher risk tolerance because I know, like, cool, I don't want to do antibiotics, but I know sometimes in life things happen, and you have to take antibiotics. So I'll communicate what there is for me to. I'll get tested. I'll make the requests that I want to from the people that I'm interacting with. I use hand sanitizer. I wash my hands when I go to the bathroom. I cover my mouth when I cough, and then sometimes like that doesn't work and you get a cold or whatever. That's what I think.
And I don't think anybody touched on the whole pregnancy thing, because that was part of the question too, but I find that kind of ridiculous because one, unwanted or surprise pregnancies happen to monogamous people all the time, and especially like we said before, not all monogamous people are actually monogamous. And to me, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, well, what do you do? It's like, well, what would you do otherwise? I mean, you'd go get a paternity test, and you'd figure out who the father is. But in this case, it's kind of the same thing of the STDs. If you're sleeping with more than one person and you're not practicing safer sex, there's a chance more than one person could be the father of your baby. But if you're open, it's a little bit easier to have that conversation, unless you've been lying about your safer sex practices to your partner, and then that's a whole nother barrel of apples. But if you have been open and honest about what you're doing and this is what you decided and you just happened to get pregnant, and just now you have extra hands, somebody else to go to the doctor with you, somebody else to help change diapers and babysit and do all these things. It's
bring you ice cream when you're pregnant in the middle of August.
Goodness gracious. I have a slightly different take on this, only because I think something like in a very mono-based culture, whether or not people are truly behaving in a mono way, we have this landscape that they say the ground is stable. It looks like this. So a dude and a chick get together, have a baby, or whatever. Now we've like integrated LGBT marriages into the work. So people are dealing and managing and working around those expectations, the narrative, if you will, of what a family looks like. So polyamory is a new narrative around what a family could look like, correct? Like 3, 4, 5 people. And I think something like an accidental pregnancy reveals fault lines in the landscape of those people in the relationship, what they're not ready to accept, what they haven't really dealt with. So things like paternal ownership of the woman and the baby, perhaps. Right? That maybe nobody thought they had that junk still in their system. Oh, but there it is. Or who's really responsible? Who's paying for this? A capitalism level of it.
Right.
So that's kind of, it's because we don't have a narrative of what other family systems could look like. We don't have a legal structure for those other narratives either. So I think that the ideal would be extra hands and lots of ice cream, and I would love lots of ice cream.
Well, so I think we do have a narrative for those other types of families, but we don't want to see it the same way. Blended families exist.
Yes.
We have, and we live now in a financial and like economic society where people are moving back in with their parents, and there's like multiple generations in a home. Like the precedent is there, and we are familiar with it. The one thing we just can't quite seem to grasp is the idea of more than one parent in the situation, that all are the same. It's mom and dad, and then, or even mom and mom, and then like another parent as a step parent. But we don't seem to grasp the idea of like everyone is parent and everyone contributes, which is interesting. I saw an article. Pretty recently that talked about how moving back in with parents is on the rise, but also adults just like co-living together, like a few couples renting a house together or buying a house together and just co-living in a space is on the rise too, because it's easier to have multiple people chipping in on things. And so I think that as our economics decline, fingers crossed that doesn't happen, but I think as it does, we'll see much more of a general look for what a blended family can look like and how we can integrate a non-monogamous family into that.
Yeah.
And I suppose as we do, we'll also see law follow that, perhaps. I mean, that I think is right. I know Woodhull does a lot with... Go ahead.
There's like the very, very beginnings of that. Like Brazil let 3 people get married, I think. So like just like we started to see queer couples go to Costa Rica to get married, I think we're going to start seeing like a huge poly contingent in Brazil. Yeah, and maybe some other places hopefully soon after. I mean, this goes down a rabbit hole, but then it starts to make, like, my sort of dream scenario is that, like, maybe marriage doesn't actually exist legally in its current form, and there's just, like, a whole set of, like, legal rights, and you go with one person, and you pick which legal rights you want with them, and with another person, it's maybe, and you get to do a, like, DIY. In my brain, there's, like, color-coded racks of forms at the, like, whatever office you go to, and you're like, oh, like, here's a whatever power of attorney, and here's a whatever thingy, and you're just like, I've assembled this legal experience with this person. Sign
so
here,
romantic.
Right?
It kind of is romantic, though, if you think about it, because you're really thinking about what your relationship means and what you're going to need for different stages. That would be very cool. Any other thoughts on unplanned pregnancies? Okay.
I have one other thought, actually, just generally to add to the discussion about non-monogamy, but around pregnancy in general, is like, there's also like a lot of things going on about class and race and access and geography and orientation and gender expression and like several things going on. One, like those things either make this a lot easier or make it a lot harder. So like poly's a lot easier if you have enough money to have a spare bedroom or a guest house, right? Or to fly to or stay in hotels. Then there's also like, this is not a brand new concept that like white people invented. Like the idea of like communal living and sharing and sleeping around existed in communities long before there was Western cultures. So this is not new, and I think a lot of times white voices and the way it's done in like upper middle class white America is what's highlighted, and that's problematic. But like access to reproductive options is hard. So, you know, yeah, I think you should be talking about unplanned pregnancies, but that may not be a thing that if you grew up in Texas, anyone ever told you about, because it's a place where they teach abstinence only, and you may not be in a situation where you have access to birth control. And so, just to make sure we don't forget that this is like, it's political and it's complicated and it's intersectional on a lot of different levels. I just want to say that part.
Good. Thank you. I'm just checking the time. We've got 25 minutes left in our hour. We had several questions about kind of communication, how communication and agreements are made, or how they can actually help support dyad relationships as well as non-monogamous relationships. Do you all have any favorite or well-used like books, tips, ways you've approached communication in your relationships that have been successful for you, or on the other hand, like things that have fallen apart and have gone really bad?
Go ahead, Lola.
I think when you get into any kind of open relationship structure, you're kind of, I don't want to say bombarded, but you kind of are. Like, everybody's like, oh, you should read this book and you should read this, and everything talks about tools and feelings and this and that, and that's great unless you have a partner who doesn't like to read and doesn't give a fuck about feelings and doesn't want to hear about your new tools and doesn't want to do any of that stuff. So it's also like, you know, going into something and arming yourself and then realizing it doesn't matter what you've done if the other person isn't going to be receptive. So I think it comes down to also kind of realizing the kind of partner you have and what they're going to receive. Like my partner is not great with sitting down and us having discussions about things over and over again. It becomes taxing for him, and it becomes something he doesn't really want to do, and he doesn't hold on to information for very long periods of time. And a lot of times action has to happen. You know, we talked a lot about opening our marriage, and he couldn't see any of it until we had a foursome with other people. And he couldn't see how we could possibly go and start having relationships with other people until he met the woman that became his girlfriend. So sometimes it doesn't matter what you talk about or how much you talk about. Sometimes action is actually going to be the thing that does the most work. And that's what I've learned throughout this entire experience, is that, you know, it's great to have these tools. I'm not saying throw that out the window, but if you have a partner that's not going to work with, you have to find other avenues around that and be prepared to do that.
The only tool I found that's actually been really helpful for me is something that I actually had nothing to do with non-monogamy. It's something I learned in like an outpatient therapy program that I did, and it's a very simple like cognitive behavioral therapy technique. And it's like a cue card, which is, it's very easy. It's just because blank doesn't mean blank, in fact blank. And that was just, it was life-changing for me, because it completely fixed every single issue I had in terms of my anxiety surrounding my relationships, and allowed me to get my focus back to communicate more effectively when I was in a place where I felt like there was chaos or crisis. And just sort of simply works of like, just because I feel like my partner doesn't love me and wants to leave me, doesn't mean my partner doesn't want me and wants to leave me. In fact, my partner just, you know, planned a vacation with me 3 months from now or whatever. Like, just giving myself something that I can focus on that's small, that I can then be like, oh, okay, this isn't happening. Now what's the next step? And how to move forward with that tool. Because for me, like, the communication part always happens during the conflict. And so I need something to get me out of that conflict as soon as possible, or else I just fixate on it and I can't move.
I had a friend, I think contracts and communication, a lot of it happens with other, like talking to other poly couples or talking to other poly identified people. So one of my friends told me that I should create a relationship contract when I opened and came out as poly with one of my partners. It was something I never even thought of, and I was in a relationship with someone for 7 years, and we never had rules necessarily that we wrote down and talked about how we're going to navigate different things. But with my current partner, we actually took, I don't know, we sat down at a restaurant and literally wrote like the declaration of our relationship. And it was really beautiful and tender. And then also it just created like a lot of space to just to be in our relationship. Like there is not like these expectations necessarily that we have. Like if someone went on a date, then I knew that she was going to tell me what happened after the date because that was in our relationship contract. I knew that the day before that she saw me, she wasn't going to be with anybody else because in our relationship contract, we weren't going to share our bodies with anybody else, if that makes sense. So it was just like really like outlining every step. And I think this person kind of got her ideas from Tristan Taormino, who is a big name in sex education and also wrote Opening Up. And Opening Up has a lot of good tools as well. And it's kind of like a guidebook to being non-monogamous or poly, if it works for you or not. So I think relationship contracts are really great, again, for monogamous people or non-monogamous people.
Excellent.
That's awesome. Yeah, look, for all humans, there's no such thing as like learning too much about yourself, how to communicate with other people, or that's certainly my philosophy. So it's great to check things out, but then you do have to go out and actually apply them and figure out how that works, right? And the work happens when you like are in that grappling stage. So one really great resource generally for communication that I like is Nonviolent Communication. And it's a great book, and the theories are awesome, and you'll read it, and you'll like, everything makes sense, and you'll cry. And then you'll go to try to talk to somebody, and you will not sound like a human being, because you will be like, I think X, and when you said these things, like, and it's like, and everyone who's ever read the book will know that you just read that book. But that's good, right? Because what it says is like, I took on this thing, I'm like integrating it, I'm applying it, and you figure out like how do you use those tools in a way that resonate in the different ways that the people, not just your romantic partners, but all the people in your life like to be communicated with, and it's going to be very different, right? So like for Lola, it's like we got to go have an experience of a thing, and then it like all snaps into place. For some people, they really want you to ask them a bunch of questions and investigate. For other people, they just want you to sit there really quietly until they're ready to like say whatever there is, right? Like, so people have different rhythms and methods. But I think like for me, I've done tons of seminars and read lots of books and like, been a super weirdo trying to communicate. And it's not a thing you ever get perfect at. But for me, it comes down to, right now anyway in my life, like, how do I come at this in a way that's really kind, that really honors the other person and honors me, where, like, I like who I am in that moment. So I can set boundaries, I can ask for what I want, but, like, when I look back on it, I can be, like, really proud of how I showed up in that conversation. Whether it's conflict, which is normally, like Becca said, where we go to when we talk about communication, or other kinds of communication, right? Like, I like really actually expressed to that person how much they meant to me, and I'm really proud of myself for that, right? Or like, I said this really vulnerable thing, or someone was mean to me, and I responded with kindness and, kept boundaries, but like showed love for them, and I'm really proud of that. So that's where I try to come from, is like being kind. Like, being human's hard. People are normally just like dealing with their own stuff when they're being a jerk to you, right? And trying to just create a little bit of space for that. And and that's not just about dating. Like, that's your parents and your coworkers and your children. your teenagers.
Oh, yes. Harmony, you asked a really great kind of question about boundaries earlier. You texted me, and you said, "What are
Oh,
your?"
it wasn't mine.
Was it
It
yours?
wasn't my question.
Another
It was
question.
just a last-minute question
Uh,
that somebody submitted.
the question was, "What are your ideas on boundaries and fair sharing in a polyamorous relationship?" I'm not entirely sure what fair sharing means. That does.
Mm.
We can take our guesses. I guess could mean sharing of partners, sharing of time. Um, but like that's definitely, I think, I love maybe infinite time is not infinite. I know that was always in more of a bugaboo in something that caused problems in my relationships. Was it if you're trying to balance work and projects and kids and people and driving and someone's not getting enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on those?
I'll go first again. I think boundaries are super important. And again, this is like, I feel like an old poly person. I'm like, but I remember when we first started out, there were so many boundaries. We had so many. And a lot of those boundaries were emotion driven. Like they had a lot to do with some jealousies that were popping up and some of the, it was all ways to like protect yourself. I'm air quoting. From all these like high octane emotions that you're feeling in the beginning, especially when new people are coming in and out and you're making things. And then now I find like our boundaries are a lot more simple and they have a lot more to do with like just general respect of each other's time, and just of each other, period. So I'm a fan of boundaries, and whenever new poly people or people new to poly tend to talk to me about it, and they're like, one of my partners made this like 2-page list of boundaries and all these things, and I'm like, baby, it's because they feel scared and they feel like they're losing something, and they feel like everything you're saying to me right now is because they literally feel like they're being replaced. And so somebody or everyone needs to sit down and have a conversation about that, because that's what all of this is. I did that. I made all of those boundaries. And then I created boundaries at another part in my relationship where when I really needed to like kind of put my foot down for me, and it was all things to make kind of protect me while we were going through some changes. But I'm a fan of it, and I think as long as you're open to them changing, that's another thing. They don't ever have to stay the same. They can fall off, and disappear and never be reenacted again. And that's the wonderful, wonderful thing about all of this is none of it is set in stone. Like you get to rewrite as necessary. And as far as time goes, man, Google Google Calendar, Google Calendar, and just I don't know. I'm being respectful of each other's time and not guilt tripping. Like I'm super busy and I have a new partner and I was just away for a week and we hadn't seen each other before, and I mean we scheduled time for when I got back, and it was like I didn't get guilt tripped, which was wonderful. And I just got like a reminder that we get like an entire day together at the end of the week. So I had a goal to work towards instead of having someone go, "Oh, I wish you made time for me." And it's like, not having that and realizing that people had lives before you came along, and you need to, hopefully they're trying to find a place for you in that. And if you really see someone trying to do that, to not make them feel bad when it's not everything you want in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know what else there is to say after that.
Yeah.
I just wanna like bow down. That's it. I don't. Yeah, I mean, you win. Yes, everybody listen to Dirty Lola. The end. That's it. There's nothing else.
Way to mom the conversation, Lola.
Sorry, guy.
No, that's so awesome. This is why you're on the panel. So we don't have to do any work. No, just kidding. I actually have 2 things I want to add from the world of social justice that I think are like concepts that inform me in this space. So one is the idea of safe spaces versus brave spaces. So a lot of times in the social justice world, there's conversation around creating a safe space, and there's some very cool people whose names are escaping me at this moment, but who have brought up the very real point that there's no such thing as an absolute safe space, especially when it comes to emotions. So if we can't promise that, it doesn't mean we just stop trying, but maybe instead the aim isn't for absolute safety for everyone to say anything, but it's about creating a space of bravery where bravery is encouraged and celebrated and honored. And there is a greater degree of safety in that, but it's not a promise, so people are owning the risk of it. So I think when it comes to boundaries and to sharing, it's not about creating everything so that you're absolutely safe and like never have a feeling that you are scared of, but how do you create the conditions that honor bravery in the relationship and communication and vulnerability and stepping up. And the sort of similar idea to that, and especially around time and fairness, is the difference between equity and equality. So equality is like everybody gets the exact same slice of pie, and equity is like this 1.5-year-old child does not need the same slice of pie that I do. That's weird, right? Like everyone should get a pie slice that is appropriate for them.
The 3-year-old's gonna want 4 pies, and no one gets any pie.
Right.
Right.
Right, exactly. And then they will throw it all on the floor and then take their diaper off and run around the house, right?
The 16-year-old says, I don't even like pie. I don't like your pie. You're a terrible cook. And why is my life so hard, Mom?
There's a really specific example, Julie.
I don't know where that came from. Sorry.
But there's I think probably people who aren't a lot in this world may have seen on Facebook an image of 3 people trying to see over a fence, and one's a short person, one's a medium height person, one's a tall person, and you give them all a stool, and the tall person could always see over and still can, and the other people can't, and you give the tall person no stool, and the medium person a little stool, and the short person a really tall stool, and they all can see over the fence. So I think if the focus is how are people honored and loved in their whole lives, and how do I do that as the person that I am in relationship to them, whether I'm a cohabitating, co-parenting, in it forever partner, or every once in a while out of town fling, what is the way that I contribute to this person seeing over the fence, right? And it's not always going to look the same. So you can't just create all the sets of rules and then have everyone just be taken care of. You got to show up and then in each moment be okay, well, now here's this set of situations. What do we do? How do we create a space that's honoring and loving? And for me, that comes down to having values-based relationships rather than rules-based relationships. And some of that is if I have a long list of rules, I will just be thinking about how I can find loopholes and get around them. That's my brain. Okay, well, technically it's not sex if, right? And I'll find and then I'm a weird asshole, right? Who's getting away with stuff in my relationship. And I know that about myself. So, it's not that I can't follow rules, but instead if I am coming from what are my values here? What are my shared agreements with this person? And am I coming from that place? And there's no bullshitting about that. Were you being loving and honoring? Well, technically, no. That doesn't work like that, right? So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Excellent. Any follow-up before we get to our last question? Okay. We're talking about wildness for the Wild Women's Adventure Club. So before we close out, we've got about 7 minutes. What's an actionable step or a piece of advice, a story you've learned from on wildness and relationship and what that means to you?
You guys always make me go first, no?
You just lose the game of chicken every time.
I know. Also, because I guess I have my thought, and I'm I'm gonna forget.
Nobody bet on Lola for a staring
No, I think taking chances, because I was monogamous, 6 years ago. I had been with the same man since I was 19, 20 years old. I'm turning 35 this year. I was in a, I was actually about to get married. I wasn't even married yet when I first started realizing that I wasn't happy in the life I was in, and had an affair, and realized I was polyamorous, and had a husband who was like, I don't care, and um, if and I say this to people all the time, is don't live your life unhappy. Don't live your life not being your true self. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to wake up and realize who you are, and realize that that may not fit the life that you're in. But I promise you that you'll be happier once you get to the other side, and you'll be miserable every day you live the lie of who you really are. And also, you're going to end up hurting everybody in your life, because you're all that animosity and not being who you want to be is just going to lead to destructive behavior. So it's take those big chances, and prepare yourself as much as you can, but just be ready for those big leaps, and it'll lead you somewhere good. I promise.
Mm.
Who's next?
I think what I've learned about wildness in terms of the relationship is that, just like we've been talking all through today's conversation, people are all complicated, and what a joy it is to get to have multifaceted relationships with people throughout your life or my life of various kinds. To consider a lover someone even if they're not someone that I'm sexual with, or having a lover who turns into a collaborative partner or a friend, or vice versa. Just to see the complexity and to be open to the possibility that the messiness will also bring joy, and it will bear fruit. So that the working through the complexity, the complicated aspects, the communication is a spiritual path in and of itself. And so that, to me, is a very wild way of looking at how human beings can bring the best out of each other.
Mm. That's so nice, Julie. You're so lovely.
Oh, thank you, Harmony. And great sex. And great sex.
Okay, I'm going to follow the great sex comment. So yes, great sex. Yes, great sex. And I think a lot of what is becoming my motto in life is to follow great sex is masturbation, and then to follow masturbation is just that relationship that you have with yourself. So I know that we're talking about multifaceted relationships, and we're talking about poly, but then also they're turning the lights off on me in here. But just having this profound relationship with yourself, where you're getting to know yourself in ways that you would give to someone else, such that you can actually do that for someone else. So I think a lot of times we are always trying to find ways to be with other people, and then as poly people, we're trying to bring more people into our structures and our lives. And I think oftentimes we need to focus on, like, what do we need as just single people? Like, what do you need, Erica? How can I take care of you, Erica, today? So I think that's where I'm at right now, which I think is weird because I'm on a conversation about being poly, but I think
it's great.
Thank you. Thanks. That's all I'm going to say. Masturbation. Yes. That's how I end every conversation.
I'm going to piggyback off of that self-love thing. One of the things that I firmly believe is that I love myself enough that nobody else has to. And I love myself viciously and ferociously and with no apologies. And because I do that, I am able to open myself up to love other people just as wildly and recklessly and without abandon as possible. And I don't need them to love me back. I can feel however I feel about them, whatever is most organic and natural towards them in that moment, in that second. And I don't need them to feel anything back because I love them. If they do, that's amazing. It's wonderful. But if they don't, I still feel great because I still remember that I don't need anybody else to love me as much as I love myself.
That's amazing. Everyone stole all my answers. But what I would add to that is, like, you don't have to be curious alone, like, in your head, or hope that somebody like me, like, creates a type form. Like, all of these things are Googleable. You can go to libraries. There are podcasts from, like, people on this panel, lots of other people. There are video series. Like, there are resources out there. And whether you're curious about, like, there's tons of nuances of questions we didn't get to, like, can four people be in a relationship? Is that a thing? It's totally a thing. You should Google that. There are, like, awesome, beautiful articles about couples who've fallen in love, right? Um, like, get curious and, like, hunt it out, because we don't get a lot of examples of things that are wild, and we have to go looking for them. So, like, if you want a life that doesn't just look like the normal script, like, you gotta work for it a little bit, but the information's out there for you. And all of us have gotten to where we've gotten because we were like, okie dokie, Google, like, STIs and safe sex and polyamory, masturbation and polyamory, how do you have kids and be polyamorous, what about jealousy, right? Like, type that shit in your Google search bar and, like, read and go to events and meet people and listen to podcasts and, like, show up and, like, do it badly and fuck it up and, like, show up again, right? Change your mind, don't get married, like, get married, do whatever you want, but, like, don't just sit there with it and, like, hope somebody comes along with the answers, because like, that's not how that usually works out.
That's an excellent, excellent way to close. As Wild Women, if anyone out there watching is interested in becoming part of the Wild Women's Adventure Club, you can go to wildwomensadventureclub.com and find all about the programs and possibilities, Twitter, Facebook groups, all kinds of stuff out there for you. Let's give a round of applause to each other here on our panel. Erica, Harmony, Lola, and Rebecca, and thank you from Julie Gillis. So take care and go out there, be wild, and explore relationships. Good night.
Woo, wild women. Ciao. Have fun, Harmony, you jerk.
Going to bed, Harmony.